Hello students. So once again I am back. How are you all? I think all are keeping well. So I welcome you all to my channel KD Exam Solutions. So today we are going to discuss a new chapter, The Triumph of Surgery by James Herriot. You can find this chapter in your book Footprints Without Feet. So today we will see this chapter in detail. So let us know something about the author. As you can see, James Alfred Wade. He was born on 3rd October 1916 and died on 23rd February 1995. He was also known by the pen name James Herriot and was a British veterinary surgeon and writer. Who is a veterinary surgeon? So, veterinary surgeon is actually a person who treats the pets. Okay. So who used many years of experiences as a veterinary surgeon to write a series of books, each consisting of stories about animals and their owners. He is best known for these semi-autobiographical works, beginning with If Only They Could Talk in 1970. So this is the name of the book, If Only They Could Talk, okay, which was published in 1970, which spawned a series of movies and television series. That means based on these books, many movies and television series were produced. Now moving to the next. Now let us see the chapter in detail. As you can see, Tricky, a small dog, is pampered and overfed by his rich mistress. He falls seriously ill and his mistress consults a veterinary surgeon. Does he perform an operation? Does the dog recover? So these are the two questions we have to see in this chapter. Does the doctor perform an operation or does the dog recover or not? So this story is about Tricky. Tricky is a dog. Okay, Tricky is a dog who is the pet of a rich lady named Mrs. Pampery. She loves her dog very much and is unable to refuse him anything he wants. Tricky is fond of eating cream cakes and chocolates. So one day when Mrs. Pampery is out with Tricky for a walk, the narrator sees them and stops to talk. While talking to Mrs. Pampery, he realizes that she has been overfeeding Tricky and also had been giving him things that he shouldn't eat, due to which Tricky had started looking like a blotted sausage. Okay, a blotted sausage. Soon Tricky got unwell and Mrs. Pampery has to call Mr. Herriot for help. She does not want to send him away, but the only way suggested by Mr. Herriot is to get him hospitalized for 15 days. Then the story unfolds into how he gets well. Now read the description to know more. Now let us see what is here in the story. So here you can find the narrator starts telling us that how he was worried about Tricky, a pet dog. So this is Tricky, a pet dog, and the narrator was very much worried about him. The narrator, Mr. Herriot, who is also a surgeon, okay, a surgeon, veterinary surgeon, stops his car as he sees Tricky with his mistress on the road, and as the narrator is shocked to see Tricky, because he looks like a bloated sausage. That means he had become very, very fat. And his eyes are red and watery. Mrs. Pamphry, who is the owner of the dog, Tricky, she starts giving explanations. She told Mr. Herriot that she thought that Tricky was malnourished. Malnourished means going hungry, going without food, because he did not have any energy and excitement. So that's what Mrs. Pamphry thought. She told him that she used to give him malt, cod liver oil and ball of Horlicks at night. You see, she used to give him malt, cod liver oil and ball of Horlicks at night apart from his regular meals, so that he could sleep at night. Although she gave him so much to eat, she says that she doesn't give him much to eat. So this is the irony here, that Mrs. Pamphry says, though she is giving him malt, cod liver oil, ball of Horlicks, everything, along with the regular meals, but still she says that she doesn't give him much to eat. Now the story moves forward, and then the narrator asks her if she had cut down on his sweets as he had asked her to do, to which she replies that she did it for a while, but she felt that he was getting weaker, because of which she had to stop being so harsh with him. Also, she says that she is unable to refuse him cakes and chocolates, as those were his favorite things. Then the narrator understood Tricky's problem. The dog was very greedy and could eat at any time of the day. He did not know how to say no to food when his stomach was full. The narrator also thought to himself to all the things that Mrs. Pamphry would not have mentioned, which she fed Tricky. Again the narrator asked him, Mrs. Pamphry, whether Tricky was exercising, to which Mrs. Pamphry replies that she does not take him out for walks once in a while, but he is not playing his ring throwing exercise, as the gardener who takes him out to play is not coming these days because of pain in his lower back. So what is said here in this paragraph? The narrator, that is Mr. Herriot, he tried to talk seriously to Mrs. Pamphry that if she did not control Tricky's eating habits and increased his exercise, he would soon fall ill. So he said that you have to increase his exercise and also control his food habits. Then only he will be alright. Otherwise, Tricky will fall ill again. He told her that she should stay strong and strict with him and put him on a diet. And Mrs. Pamphry accepted that, although she knew that Mr. Herriot was right, but it was too difficult for her to refuse him for anything. Why it was too difficult for her to refuse him to give food? Because she loved her dog very much. But then she left the place as if she was now ready to follow the new routine properly. Mr. Herriot was watching them go and looking at Tricky walking unsteadily. The narrator was also looking at the tweed coat that Tricky was wearing. He had a wardrobe full of these coats and also raincoat for the rainy days. So for winter he had tweed coat and for rainy days he had raincoat. This line also suggests that Mrs. Pamphry was a rich lady, as she had a lot of money to spend on her dog. So what does it show? So different coats for different seasons. It shows that Mrs. Pamphry was a rich lady and she could afford to provide all these coats to her dog. But the narrator knew that soon he would be receiving a call about Tricky falling ill, and it came. So as a surgeon, as a doctor, he knew that Tricky was going to fall ill and very soon he was going to receive a call from Mrs. Pampery, and as he had expected, the call came from Mrs. Pampery. After a few days, and Mrs. Pampery was very upset as Tricky was not eating anything, not even his favorite dishes, and was vomiting frequently. He did not even want to do anything, so he was vomiting frequently and he did not even want to do anything. So he had become very, very lazy, lethargic. Being a veterinary doctor, the narrator knew that the only way to get Tricky well was to get him out of house for a few days. He then suggested to Mrs. Pampery that it would be good to get Tricky hospitalized and keep him under observation for 15 days. Upon hearing this, Mrs. Pampery nearly fainted. She was sure that if Tricky did not see her every day, he would surely die. But the narrator kept his words. He told her that this was the only option as Tricky was very ill. The narrator thought it would be best to avoid any delays and get him to the hospital as soon as possible. He went to their house, and even though Mrs. Pampery was crying because she did not want her dog to go away from her, he took the dog, wrapped it in a blanket and put him in the car. So what is said here in this paragraph? The maids were then woken up and asked to get out of Tricky's stuff. So that means, as you know, that Mrs. Pampery was a rich lady, so she had got a lot of maid servants also at home. So she asked her maids to get things of Tricky ready. Okay, his stuff included things like his day bed, night bed, okay, day bed, night bed, and favorite cushions, toys, rubber rings, breakfast ball, lunch ball, and his snack ball. So Mr. Herriot knew that so much stuff won't fit in his car because his car was very small and Mrs. Pampery had come with so much of stuff. So he thought that these things would not fit into his car. So he started rushing things. As the doctor was leaving with Tricky, Mrs. Pampery threw a lot of coats that Tricky used to wear in the car. And as the narrator was turning the car, on the turn he saw through the rear mirror that everyone was crying. Everyone was crying here means Mrs. Pampery as well as the maid servants. All of them were crying. That the doctor could see in the mirror. He patted the little helpless animal who responded by wagging his tail. The narrator then thought and told Tricky that he knew that Tricky did not have any energy, but he surely had a way to get him better. So now he understood that he had got some ways to make him well, and that's why he patted the dog. Now what happens next? As soon as they reached the hospital, so now the doctor took Tricky and came to the hospital. And then all the other dogs gathered around the doctor because, as you can see, there were so many dogs in the hospital, and all of them they gathered around the doctor. Tricky looked at all of them, and when the doctor put him down on the carpet, he couldn't even move. The other dogs then sniffed him and thought to themselves that he was a very uninteresting object and that there was no use standing there and left. So other dogs came and gathered around him. But when they saw that this dog, Tricky, was not even moving, then they thought that it was actually a very, very uninteresting character, and that's why they left. Then the narrator made the bed for Tricky in a warm box along with the other dogs. For 2 days, the narrator kept him just on water and nothing else. That means just for 2 days, he gave him only water and nothing else. On the second day, he roamed around looking at the place around him. And on the third day, he was also making noise to let the people in the hospital know that he too wanted to go out with the other dogs. That means for 2 days he kept quiet, but the third day he started to bark, make noise. When the narrator opened the door, Tricky quickly came out and was surrounded by Joe, who was a greyhound. Greyhound is a breed of dog, okay? So greyhound and his friends. Again, after sniffing him for a moment, all of them left for the garden, where Tricky followed them. Later in the evening, the narrator was present at the dinner time and was watching all of them, especially Tristan. As he was slopping the food, all of them were eating with great speed because they knew that if they didn't finish quickly, then the other dog, after finishing his meal, would come to eat their meal. So there was a fight for the meal. When everybody finished their food, Tricky went around looking at the shining balls. All the balls were cleaned up and also licked a few balls. The very next day, an extra ball was put for him, and then he started getting better really quickly. He did not require any medicines and started playing with the other dogs the whole day. So now Tricky had started playing with the other dogs. They all used to play with each other, bump into each other, walk over each other and squash each other. So all of the other dogs accepted him as a family member. Although he was very different from others, as he was very well taken care of by his owner and the others were not. So he came from a very rich family. The owner of this dog was a rich lady, whereas the other dogs, they had not enjoyed that favor, and that's why he was quite different from other dogs. He was well taken care of. He also used to fight for his meals with his fellow dogs, who were much larger in size than him. At night, he would also hunt rats in the hen house. He was enjoying as he had never done such things before. So now Tricky was actually enjoying all this fun there. All this while, Mrs. Pamprey used to call more than 12 times a day to inquire about Tricky. So she was very restless. She used to call more than 12 times a day to inquire how Tricky was. And Mr. Herriot used to avoid questions about the coats, beds, etc. So she used to inquire and ask, how was Tricky? Did he give him the coats? Did he give him a proper bed to sleep? But he told her that Tricky was doing very good and was recovering very fast. So Mrs. Pamprey wanted Tricky to recover fast because she could not stay without Tricky, live without Tricky. So she started sending 24 eggs every day. Okay, 24 eggs every day for him. But Mr. Herriot and his parents would have 2 eggs each for breakfast. Then, to improve the quality of blood, Mrs. Pamprey started sending in bottles of wine. Then it became Mr. Herriot's habit to have 2 glasses of wine before lunch and a few along with it. But you see here, though Mrs. Pamprey was sending wine and eggs for Tricky, but who was having it? Mr. Herriot along with his companion. They used to have this wine and eggs. They were enjoying it. Mrs. Pamprey started sending brandy. At that time, Mr. Herriot was not able to believe that Mrs. Pamprey actually wanted them to give brandy to Tricky. They shared it amongst themselves some days, and Mr. Herriot used to feel very happy as he would start his day with extra eggs. Then he would have a few glasses of wine in the afternoon and then ending the day with brandy in the evening. So all these things were consumed by Mr. Herriot. Because of all the things that were being sent for Tricky, Mr. Herriot was really tempted to keep him as a permanent guest at the surgery. So now what happened? Now Mr. Herriot was also tempted to keep Tricky as permanent guest. Why he was tempted to keep Tricky as permanent guest? Because he was getting all these eggs, brandy, wine, all for free. So he really wanted that Tricky should stay with them forever, but then he realized that Mrs. Pampery, who was like a mother to Tricky, she was like a mother to Tricky, was really suffering and really wanted Tricky to come back soon. But on the other hand, Mr. Herriot also realized that it was quite difficult for Mrs. Pampery to live without Tricky. She was not enjoying her days. So after 15 days, Tricky was ready to go back home, and Mr. Herriot called up Mrs. Pampery to come pick him up. So now after 15 days, now Mr. Herriot gave her a call and he told that Tricky was now alright and she could take him home. Within a few minutes, a long black car came outside. So it was obviously Mrs. Pampery who had come in the car. So when the chauffeur opened the door, Mrs. Pampery was sitting inside, really nervous as well as excited. So when the driver opened the door of the car, then Mr. Herriot saw that Mrs. Pampery was sitting in the car and she was really nervous and was also excited. She was asking with a nervousness in her voice that was Tricky really better, to which the doctor replied positively. So she asked Mr. Herriot, was Tricky really better? And Mr. Herriot said yes, obviously he is now alright. Then Mr. Herriot went inside to get Tricky. When Mr. Herriot went to the garden behind the house, he saw all the dogs moving around in garden. So when he went behind the house, there was a garden, and there he saw that Tricky was moving along with the other dogs, and Tricky was sitting between them. He had recovered wonderfully in 2 weeks. He was looking much healthier, playing with other dogs, and his chest was touching the ground. So now he was very happy and he was playing with the other dogs. He had become a good muscular dog within 2 weeks. Now when Mr. Herriot took Tricky to the front of the house, he saw that the chauffeur was still holding the door of the car, and as soon as Tricky saw his mother-like mistress, he was overjoyed. So as Tricky saw Mrs. Pampery, he was very happy. He ran away and jumped into the lap of Mrs. Pampery and started licking her face, barking in excitement. So what did Tricky do? He started licking her face and also barked in excitement. While all this was happening, the chauffeur and Mr. Herriot got all his stuff out to the car, which had not been used during the treatment in the last 14 days. So by the time both mistress and the dog, they were enjoying each other's company. The driver, the chauffeur, and Mr. Herriot, both of them, they got things out, the things which were not used in the last 14 days. So when Mrs. Pampery was leaving, she leaned out of the window and said to Mr. Herriot, with tears of joy in her eyes, that she could not thank him enough for what he had done. So she was full of tears and she said that she could not thank him what he had done. And this is a triumph of surgery, meant that the treatment was given to Tricky had been successful. So the treatment which was given by Mr. Herriot was successful. Thank you for watching this video and hope you have understood this chapter. If you have any queries, you can write me in the comment box and surely I will try to answer all your queries. And if you have liked my video, then don't forget to share and subscribe, and don't forget to press the bell icon so that you can get the latest videos. Thank you.